All right, guys. So what I got for you today is what if Yuji was a Kryptonian? Yeah, this is actually something that somebody recommended, and honestly, I was like, yeah, why not? Why not do Superman? So yeah, basically, this is actually what if Yuji was Superman, but I'm just gonna be saying it's like what if Yuji was a Kryptonian. So yeah, should be pretty cool. Should work out. So yeah, if you guys do end up enjoying this video, please be sure to. Also, yeah, by the way, basically, he's going to be he's basically going to just be Superman, but he's going to be a Kryptonian now. That's kind of just the main way this works. So, yeah, guys, do enjoy this video. Please be sure to leave some what ifs just in the comment section below, and let's dive into this what if right now. So, we start this story off with seeing Yuji, except we don't just see Yuji because we have to go back before we see Yuji. We see in the stars, we see a space pod, and we see it crashing, going in from the outer sphere, the atmosphere, falling down as it would reach the ground. Basically it would hit the earth, and there is where we would see Yuji's grandfather in the main timeline, as he would just be walking, having one of these normal walks in the forest. I'm going to be saying he was just walking in the forest, having a good time. This is before he gets sick, like literally like a couple of years before he gets sick. So basically he would go towards the pod. Obviously he's kind of weirded out and scared of the pod, obviously, like who wouldn't be, but he decided to go and check it out because, well, he's interested. So that's exactly what Yuji's dad does. I mean, our dad grandfather does. And basically he checks it out. And when he checks it out, he realizes that this thing can open. So he opens it and he realizes that inside of it, it's a baby boy. And honestly, Yuji's grandfather is quite weirded out by this. So what he decides to do is he thinks about calling, personal services or something like that to basically come and get the boy, but he decides against it. He thinks, that probably isn't the best way to go about this. He decides to instead pick up the boy and take him back to his house, considering he was just like a baby and all. And so from that day forward, that's where Yuji basically would be with his grandfather in the main timeline, where basically what we would see happen is basically his grandfather would care for him for about 3 years until unfortunately his grandfather would start to get sick. I know I said he wasn't sick yet, but that's kind of what I mean. He's not so sick to the point where he has to go to the hospital, but he's starting to get sick. So as the time goes on, basically Yuji would be around the age of about 7 when his grandfather is, of course, at that point he needs to go to the hospital. He can't stay around anymore. So ultimately by this point, Yuji at 7 years old, you would probably imagine that his grandfather would have to give up care of Yuji or something. But considering Yuji kind of just lived by himself in the main timeline, I'm going to be saying that's not the case. But not only that, I'm also going to be saying that Yuji also was different from other kids. And Yuji's grandfather, again in the main timeline, would actually at this point, I'm just going to say he's Yuji's grandfather in general, because at this point he basically just is. Basically that's how their relationship works and functions, instead of saying in the main timeline every single time, because I know that's probably getting annoying. So yeah, basically Yuji, basically he's this ridiculous talent. He's extremely smart. He basically can learn things just by reading the books that his grandfather gives to him instantly, and he can just flip through the pages and just memorize all the stuff, because Yuji had super speed, but not just super speed in the conventional sense. No, he had super speed for his brain, his movements, and everything that Yuji genuinely wanted to do. He could do it with ease, such as being able to read all these books and immediately understand them with little to no difficulty at all. Of course, his grandfather would be kind of shocked about this and all, but ultimately he would think this is a good thing because he doesn't know how much longer he'll be able to take care of Yuji. Of course, eventually he would tell Yuji of basically his lineage and basically everything that had happened about him falling out of the sky and stuff, with Yuji being confused and questioning his grandfather because frankly he just thought that they were like kin. He thought they were actually related, but his grandfather would tell him that no, we're not actually related. You came falling out of the sky and I just so happened to take you back home with me one fateful night, and that's how that went. And Yuji hearing this would kind of be shocked by all of this, thinking, is that so? So we're really not related, he would think, which would make Yuji very sad. But Yuji would tell his grandfather that either way, he was going to look out for him and take care of him, and that he doesn't have to worry as he can take care of himself, and that he's done a pretty good job of learning how to do that already. So Yuji's grandfather gives a smile, and of course after this happens, this is where we see Yuji would continue to keep growing up, basically finding things out very quickly. So first thing Yuji would find out is that he can fly, He has super speed, and again, not just super speed when it comes to naturally being super fast. He can apply this to his mind, his thinking, his motions, his movements, literally everything, not just speed itself. So it made him very, very adaptable and made him really some unknown talent when it came to schooling. Because Yuji in school was a grade type of student, right? He was a get all A's type of guy because he was so smart. He had tons of friends, and even though Yuji was popular in the main timeline, you could probably say he's even more popular in this one, just because he's super smart, he's super strong, and he's super fast. So Yuji in the original timeline had a ridiculous like physiology, right? Like he was crazy good when it came to his physicals. That was what Yuji just was. But now Yuji is superhuman in every way you could humanly imagine. He would literally just move sometimes and people wouldn't even be able to see him. But Yuji had long since found out that showing off his capabilities probably wasn't the best thing to do, as he knew that he wasn't from this place, and if he showed too much, well, the government or the police or anybody might, get suspicious, and for it, Yuji might just find himself in a jail somewhere. So he would make sure to not show off too much, show off too many of his powers, because frankly speaking, if he showed off too many, well, he might just get sent to prison again or get experimented on, and Yuji didn't want that. Just to clarify, when I say show off too many, I mean like he's showing them off, but he's showing them off human style. Like basically he uses them to the point where a human would be able to do if they worked hard enough. But he makes it look like it's just finesse, like he's just built different from everybody else. Even though that's not the case, dude just literally has superpowers. Anyways, Yuji will continue to keep finding out his abilities, such as having super breath, freeze breath. You know what I mean? He would have all that stuff. He would also have laser vision, x-ray vision, and would have super hearing, able to hear things from very long ranges. He would obviously has his laser vision, and that was Yuji's powers. But not only that, Yuji would find something else out. Aside being able to fly, his super speed, basically having super intelligence as well, as he was able to catalog things extremely well in his head. Yuji was also even able to realize that when he was in the sun, he felt the most powerful. And that's when he realized, and it clicked for him, that the sun is where he gained most of his power from. It was actually what gave him his powers in the first place. And so Yuji would realize that if he ever needed a boost of power, going to the sun would probably be the best way to go about that. But Yuji would think he's kind of as strong as he'll probably ever need to be, as Yuji wasn't some type of brawler. He didn't really think he would ever need his strength or powers to do anything too crazy. He just kind of thought that it was kind of cool that he was an alien, and was kind of just accepting his life on Earth, not really wanting to think too much about it. Just kind of trying to take care of his grandfather, which is what he would do. And that's what basically Yuji's life looked like throughout his early life, up until the age of 15, where this is where we would see the official story that took place in the main canon basically start to unfold. With basically Yuji, of course, going to school that fateful day, hanging out with the Occult Research Club, which even though Yuji was even more popular in this timeline, he would still find some time to hang out with the Occult Research Club. They were his friends after all, and I don't feel like Yuji would switch up on them just because he had superpowers at an early age or was an alien, as I think he would just still vibe with them. So after this would happen, this is basically where we would see that Yuji wasn't just physically gifted, because basically when the sports captain tried to challenge Yuji, he had tried in this timeline many different times before to this point, again, because Yuji was basically perfect in everything. Gym, math, science, English. He would have been the perfect person to have on your team. But Yuji didn't really care about that. He always just wanted to go home from school, hang out with the Occult Research Club whenever he could, and help his grandfather, of course. So that was what Yuji was about. Nonetheless, after all this would happen, this is when we would then see Yuji beat the sports captain and his stupid challenge, as Yuji would just effortlessly do this, not even having to be like that into it, just defeating it. Obviously, Yuji did the same thing in the main timeline, but I mean more effortlessly. Like, he's just trying to do the whole Gohan thing. When Gohan went to school, he's like, how much do I hold back here? Like, you know what I mean? That's what he's trying to do. So ultimately, after this happens, this is when we would then see Yuji, as he would basically leave to go take care of his grandfather, as you would expect, saying deuces to his friends at the Occult Research Club. Of course, this is where we would then switch scenes to see Megumi sitting there looking at the kid who was just walking off, who of course had the cursed artifact, as that wouldn't really change at all in this timeline. Yuji would still have that because, well, he still grew up with his grandfather, so obviously he would still have the cursed artifact. That wouldn't really change at all. And just as you would expect, he already had given it to the occult research club. So with that being said, this is where we would then see a change of scenes as Yuji would walk into the hospital to have what he wouldn't even know was his final conversation with his grandfather. As he would begin to talk to his grandfather, this is when they would make that promise that is so well known, that is iconic, honestly, probably at this point, where basically he would promise to help others and to help people. And Yuji would agree to this, telling his grandfather that he would do just that. He would tell his grandfather that if he really tried, with all the knowledge that he's gained over all this time, he thinks that he could really try some things that can make his condition better. He should really let him. But this is when his grandfather would say, "No, Yuji, this is exactly what I want to happen. And ultimately, I believe that you can live the life that you want to live, and that I appreciate everything you've done for me up until this point and how you've given my life such joy," his grandfather would say. And ultimately, he would say that this is just his time and that just make sure you keep that promise about helping others, his grandfather would say. As Yuji would basically nod as tears start to roll down his face, as Yuji was more sympathetic in this timeline, I guess. And after this happens, this is when his grandfather would unfortunately pass away. As Yuji would ultimately feel saddened as he would leave the hospital after talking to the nurse. And of course, as Yuji was saddened and leaving, this is where we would then see Megumi approach Yuji as he would ask him about the cursed artifact. Obviously, Yuji didn't have any cursed energy in this timeline, as frankly, there was just nothing that would happen that would make that happen. Yuji was just an alien, and because he was an alien, all his powers came from that. They didn't actually come from being a sorcerer or anything. Of course, this is where we would then see Yuji be confused about what Megumi was talking about, because what was Megumi talking about? A cursed artifact? Like, if you actually went up to somebody that didn't know what you were talking about, what would you expect them to say? So obviously, Yuji says, "What?" And this is when Megumi would explain to Yuji that he should have had like a little box, and it was something inside of it that's extremely dangerous and that he needed it. This is where we would then see Yuji basically get a flash thought as he would immediately remember what Megumi was talking about after giving the description, as again, this dude is like a super genius. Of course, this is where Yuji would tell him that he gave it to the occult research club. And this is when Megumi would say, "Okay, all right, they're in danger. So you stay here." And before Megumi could even finish that sentence, Yuji was already gone. He had used his super speed to traverse his way all the way to the school in about maybe 30 seconds. On arrival, Yuji wouldn't be able to see the cursed spirits that were trying to attack the occult research club, of course, but Yuji would obviously be able to see that something was wrong and ultimately be able to, just like in the main timeline, as still, this is still Yuji. Like, I mean, he's a Kryptonian and he's an alien, but he's still Yuji. So he would still have his traits. And that means he would still be able to attack the cursed spirits off instinct. If anything, his instincts are even better. He's even faster, sharper, has better senses. Yes, super hearing. For crying out loud. I'm pretty sure he'd be able to do this, right? So ultimately, with off instinct, he's just able to easily defeat the likes of the cursed spirits. In fact, he's able to beat them all off instinct before Megumi even shows up. Yuji is low-key literally just built different as a Kryptonian. I don't know what to tell you. As this is where we would then see Megumi show up to be shocked that Yuji, without even a slight hint of cursed energy, has somehow managed to defeat all of the cursed spirits. With that being said, this is where we would then see Megumi ultimately ask Yuji for the cursed artifact. And this is where we would then see Yuji ultimately say that it should be right here, as he would go get it from the occult research club. And that's basically where the finger would obviously be. Now, since Yuji had obviously defeated all of the cursed spirits, there was literally no reason for Yuji to even eat the finger in this timeline. So Yuji obviously wouldn't do that, which is actually going to be like the first time Yuji in my what if has not eaten the finger. But it's literally because there's no reason for him to do that. Like, he has literally none. He had already beaten all the cursed spirits. And if any more came, well, so be it. Who cares? So ultimately, when we see all this finish, this is where we would then see the likes of Gojo teleport to Megumi and Yuji's location, because he was curious to find out what had actually taken place here. You know, he had sensed the battle, or the cursed spirits basically getting washed is what he had sensed. That's actually what he sensed. So he appeared to question Megumi on the situation. He wanted to know what had unfolded or what had taken place. So that is where we would see Megumi begin to explain to Gojo the circumstances of what had happened here. And to Gojo's shock, he wouldn't be able to even comprehend what he was hearing. He would have heard that Yuji Itadori, this random person, was somehow able to take down all these cursed spirits when he had no cursed energy. It didn't make sense. But this is when Megumi began to explain that when he was watching Yuji at school, when he was just there to obviously, stake out the cursed artifact, he would begin to tell Gojo about just how physically gifted Yuji was. But it wasn't like some normally physically gifted stuff he was saying. It was like Yuji was holding back his own physical stats. And this is when Gojo would be confused by this. He would think about Toji for a second because, well, why else wouldn't he think about Toji? He's like the first person you would think about when you think about somebody having super enhanced like capabilities to like some ridiculous degree that they shouldn't. But he would obviously let that sit because that wouldn't really make that much sense, as he wasn't like a Zenin, so he would just think that's not possible, he would imagine. But then again, if I'm correct, I don't think Gojo even understood why Toji was so physically gifted. I don't think he ever actually found out why. Like, I don't ever think he found out like anything about heavenly restriction. But I could be wrong about that. But I don't think he actually did. I just think he knows Toji was just like crazy physically gifted, if I'm not wrong. So yeah, maybe he would just relate it to the Zenin clan. But nonetheless, that's what Gojo would be thinking. So this is where we would then see the likes of Yuji basically sitting there as he would just be hearing this whole conversation take place and genuinely just knowing that this can get really bad. But more importantly, he'd be kind of confused because he would wonder how Gojo was even able to get here so quick, or what he had even used to get here. He would start to wonder if maybe Gojo himself had powers. And clearly Megumi talking about a sorcerer, well, yeah, that would obviously confuse him as well, because what the heck is a sorcerer, a Jujutsu sorcerer? But nonetheless, this is where we would then see Gojo begin to explain Jujutsu Society to Yuji, as again, Yuji had no cursed energy, so it's not like they were like, oh, you follow our parameters, you follow into our, niche, so it's like you can just join or whatever. He would genuinely not know what to do with Yuji. And again, since Yuji had not eaten the finger, there was really no reason to really make Yuji come to Jujutsu High, so he really wouldn't have anything to say to him. But this is when Megumi would actually ask Yuji if he would be willing to come to Jujutsu High. Megumi being the one to ask. And the reason for that is because he knows that there's something deeper about the likes of Yuji that they just don't know about. And they would be really curious to see what Yuji would do, or if Megumi would. Gojo just thinks that because he doesn't have any cursed energy, that frankly, it wasn't really make that much sense. And again, since he hadn't eaten the finger, well, it wouldn't really make that much sense either. So once this conversation ends, it's where we would then see Yuji, after compiling his thoughts, being a super, intelligent person. This is where we would then see him ultimately decide that he will go with Gojo and Megumi, just so he can actually see like what it's like or what it's about. And if it works out, then yeah. But if not, he'll just come back to school and basically go back to hanging out with the Occult Research Club and going back to his day-to-day life. So they basically say bet, as we would see them go and do a change of scenes to Jujutsu High. Now, obviously, because Yuji didn't eat the finger, this would lead to a scenario where there is basically no Sukuna in this story. Yeah, there's going to be no Sukuna in this story. Frankly, due to the fact that there is no reason to have Sukuna in this story, because, well, he just doesn't need to be here. It's kind of irrelevant. He's not going to, like, impact anything, and of course, he can impact some plans or whatever, but there's just really no reason for Sukuna to be in this story. Yuji's overpowered enough without Sukuna, or if he were to gain his abilities or any of that. And because he's not actually related to Sukuna like in the main timeline, it's not like he actually would have been able to even gain any of Sukuna's abilities or anything. Plus, since he's so powerful, like the whole thing where Sukuna might have had to revive him at the detention center, that just wouldn't have happened either. So it's just safe to say that it's probably just best for that to not really be a problem. So once this happens, obviously he would get there and he would be showed around Jujutsu High, and obviously Yuji wouldn't really know what to make of it. He'd be kind of confused. He would say it's a really old looking school. Obviously they would skip that room that they went in where Gojo would give Yuji the alternative, because he's not Sukuna's vessel, so he doesn't need to have that. There is no, if you don't do this you die, or you can postpone this and you die, because he's just not in the threat of dying or anything like that. He's just here to basically view the school to see if he'd be willing to join, as Megumi thinks he would be a very good asset after what he was able to pull off again for saving the Occult Research Club. So after this all happens, this is where we would then see Yuji basically be shown around, where Yuji would begin to read up on some of the books at Jujutsu High to basically get an understanding of the history and what a Jujutsu sorcerer is, as Gojo and Megumi during this tour would also begin to explain to him what they basically do and what their whole deal is. Yuji, hearing this, would be shocked to hear that there were other people in the world who had special abilities, even if they weren't as powerful as his, nearly as powerful, mind you, or as fast. they would still have powers nonetheless, but they would be limited and have very specific things that were going on. Of course, this is where we then see Yuji actually ask something that I'm pretty sure nobody was expecting me to do. But this is when Yuji would actually ask Gojo for a fight to just genuinely see how powerful he really was. Now, Megumi hearing this would genuinely be shocked. He'd be losing his brains. He'd be like, "What? You want to fight Gojo, sensei? You have any idea how crazy you must be to do that?" Whereas when Gojo hears this, he genuinely can't do anything but laugh, thinking, "Oh, okay, that works actually," because I kind of was curious to just know how powerful you were. And after that, Yuji was saying something about, could you maybe explain the Sukuna figure to me after we're done, potentially? Which, of course, Gojo would nod his head and say, yeah, no big deal. We can go over that. But how about this? If I win, you join Jujutsu High. And if you don't win, then, well, what do you want? He would ask. With obviously Yuji saying, I don't really care. You can just have that as a goal. Ultimately, this is where we would then see Yuji say nothing, basically, as Gojo would say that if Yuji, just to make that make sense, because I think I said that kind of wrong. If Gojo wins, Yuji has to join Jujutsu High. If Yuji wins, it literally doesn't matter because he had nothing he wanted to say either way, because honestly, Yuji doesn't see a world where he loses. But this is when the battle between Gojo and Yuji would start, which obviously just doesn't happen at all in the main timeline. This is just something I came up with because I genuinely just think this would probably happen, because I think Yuji would just want to see, the limits of what Gojo could do, as he was called the strongest. And Yuji genuinely just thought that he was the strongest because he just didn't think anybody could beat him. So this is where we would then see Gojo begin to battle the likes of Yuji, which would actually not be going that well for Gojo. But it wouldn't be going that good for Yuji either. When Yuji tries to punch Gojo, he can't hit him due to infinity. And whenever Gojo tries to severely hurt Yuji, it just doesn't work. He tries red, he tries blue. He thought about using Hollow Purple, but he thought that might be too extreme. But ultimately, he tries everything, and it just doesn't work on Yuji. So basically what happens here is it ultimately becomes a draw. I would love to make this fight sound really cool, like give you a lot of details and stuff, but really the fight just can't happen because Yuji has invulnerability, right? Thanks to his solar energy that was in his body, making him basically invulnerable. Yuji also has speed that is far surpassing Gojo's, so Yuji can easily dodge all of Gojo's attacks whenever he gets ready. So ultimately Gojo is kind of on the back foot. Basically, like, if Gojo didn't have infinity, he would honestly be cooked here. And of course, I understand that Superman could beat Gojo because Superman has like immeasurable speed. And if you have immeasurable, actually not even that, if you just have infinite speed, you should be able to surpass Gojo's like infinity. But the thing about that is this is Yuji as a Kryptonian. He's not Superman's reincarnation exactly. So he's just kind of a Kryptonian. So basically he has all the Kryptonian powers, but that doesn't mean he has the same power scaling as Superman, although he's extremely powerful, no doubt. And powerful enough to the point where Gojo can't really do anything. So Gojo's left with two options here. Either Gojo can use his domain expansion to ultimately try to incapacitate Yuji, even though that wouldn't really do anything because Yuji has super intelligence as a Kryptonian. And also I'm pretty sure Kryptonians have like ways to get around like mind hacks in general. So I don't really think that would work on Yuji in the first place. And not only that, the next thing would be a Hollow Purple, which Yuji would easily dodge. So yeah, I don't really think Gojo has any win cons here at all. Whereas Yuji just can't do anything to Gojo, as there's just nothing he can throw at him to basically go beyond infinity. Maybe using his max speed, but I don't really think it would be that. I think it'd be like massively faster than light if I had to say for Yuji. So yeah, he doesn't have the speed to break past infinity. So after about 30 minutes of this, basically they both decide that there's not going to be a winner. But Yuji does decide something. He would acknowledge that Gojo was pretty strong, but he's not strong in the conventional sense. He's strong in the fact that his ability makes him pretty much unbeatable because nobody can actually touch him. Which Gojo would say, don't you think that makes me the strongest? And he would say, well, yeah, but I'm actually faster and more physically strong, which is what Yuji would say. Obviously, during this battle, Yuji hadn't shown that he could fly, as he just didn't need to. He could just stay on the ground and obviously punch and kick, and obviously he had super speed anyways, so there just wasn't no real reason to show off his flying. Ultimately, Megumi seemed this to be shocked that, honestly, Gojo literally actually couldn't do anything to Yuji at all, except just give up, because there was really nothing he could do. Like, he couldn't actually hurt Yuji thanks to his invulnerability. So after this all happens, this is where basically Yuji would decide right then and there, though, that even though he didn't technically lose and they decided to draw, this is when he would tell Gojo that, yeah, I think I will join Jujutsu High, as he would tell them about him and his grandfather's promise about helping others. And he says that if a Jujutsu sorcerer's job is to exterminate these curses that I was able to beat at the school, helping the Occult Research Club, then I actually don't think it would be that crazy for me to join, because that way I could help tons of people, right? And that's when Megumi would nod and Yoda would say, yeah, definitely, with a smirk on his face, thinking that, wow, I can't believe I was able to get this monster into the school. I wonder how he's going to shake things up, Gojo would think, as this is where he would basically officially join the likes of Jujutsu High, as he would begin his training to become a Jujutsu sorcerer, which obviously Yuji really didn't need to begin his training to become a Jujutsu sorcerer, as he didn't really need curse energy and stuff. But he thought that, well, actually being able to see the curses instead of fighting them off instinct would actually probably be a lot better, as Yuji was a guy of knowledge nonetheless, or at least in this timeline anyways. So ultimately, after this would all take place, this is where we do a change of scenes to see him meet with Nobara for the first time, or once he does, they would work together to save that kid, obviously like he did in the main timeline, because that's Yuji's whole goal, except he wouldn't really need Nobara's help at all to pull this off. He kind of just solo it, and Nobara would be shocked by this. Nobara would ask him what was his curse technique, or what was his deal. How was he able to do this? Was his curse technique like strength or something? When she would find out a ridiculous revelation that Yuji actually didn't have any cursed energy and was not using a cursed technique at all. This was just his regular physical stats, which would shock Nobara. Again, Yuji hadn't shown off his ability to fly either, so yeah, he was kind of just saving that in the back burner, as again, he could just walk and run and jump really fast and high, so he doesn't really need to fly. Of course, he would fly when he wants to or when nobody could see, but obviously flying with scared ordinary people, because imagine if they just saw someone flying through the sky, that'd be really weird and freaky, and that would probably lead to people calling the authorities and, you know, who knows, coming after Yuji. So he would try to refrain from that, even if he lives in a world with Jujutsu sorcerers and stuff. They might not think it's crazy, but yeah, let me just say the regular human population wouldn't. And obviously Yuji isn't a bad person, so he's not going to kill all the people on the planet if they see him, even though he probably realistically could, except for Gojo. And yeah, so with that being said, this is where we do another change of scenes to see the next arc beginning to start, which would be none other than the Tension Center arc. So basically what we see to start this arc off is we see Gojo, just as you would expect, explaining the Cursed Spirit ranking system. After all of them are informed and they all nod their heads, this is when all three of them would enter the detention center, where right off the bat something changes completely. Where we would normally see Nobara get teleported away, this is where that would not happen, as Yuji would easily be able to save Nobara from getting teleported and just stop the whole attempt in general. Once Nobara is safe though, this is where they would run into the likes of the special grade curse, with it looking happy to see the likes of Yuji. But not for the reasons you think, as Yuji wasn't Sukuna's vessel, so it wasn't like looking at him like that for the sake of maybe beating Yuji and taking the finger. No, it was just looking at Yuji like that because he wanted to kill Yuji. And that goes the same for Megumi and Nobara for that fact. So this is where we would then see the special grade curse go on to attack the likes of Megumi, Yuji, and Nobara. But the thing about this is the special great curse had no idea that Yuji had been training with Gojo just enough to the point where he could actually see curses now. He had a very small amount of curse energy thanks to training with the likes of Gojo, just to basically be able to do this very thing. And now that Yuji could do this, well, it's kind of just over for the special great curse. If a lot of y'all were thinking that, it's kind of crazy that I got to the special great curse this late in the video, potentially, if you were wondering that, it's because the special great curse is about to get negative death by Yuji. Yuji would tell the two of them to back up, as he was going to defeat the special great curse all by himself, with them thinking that he was crazy because there was no way he was going to pull that off. But this is when they would ultimately step back, as Yuji had a serious look on his face, as with the special great curse pulling his arm back, getting ready to punch Yuji in the face. This is where we would then see Yuji just appear beside the special great curse, with the special great curse getting obviously perception blissed, as he genuinely had no idea that Yuji had even moved from beside him. When the special great curse actually blinked again though, this is when he would notice Yuji wasn't even there, but he would see Megumi and Nobara and be kind of confused, with a weird look coming over his face, as it just didn't expect this, as it would get blindsided by a punch to its skull, getting sent crashing into the ground. After this takes place, this is when the special grade would get up, just barely, as it would start to regenerate, as it just genuinely couldn't believe the amount of force Yuji had put behind that attack. Nobara and Megumi can't believe what they're seeing either. But this is when it would try again to attack the likes of Yuji, trying its best, firing some cursed energy balls at it, trying to deal some damage from trying to keep its distance, right? But this wouldn't work against Yuji, as it had no effect on him at all, as it would deal no damage, as again, Yuji has invulnerability. Yuji would then use his laser vision, which he would show off, which would shock the likes of both Megumi and Nobara, as they just wouldn't be able to believe that what they were seeing. Somehow Yuji had just unlocked his curse technique, they would be thinking, because how else could he be shooting lasers? Of course, these lasers would hit the special grade curse, as it would literally tear him to shreds, as Yuji would use it precisely with his X-ray vision to see exactly the perfect parts to dismember the special grade curse. As with these being done, this is basically where we would then see the special grade curse having taken too much damage to regenerate from, as we would then see Yuji appear over it, as it would deliver one final blow to the special grade curse, which is where we would then see it be exercised and defeated with relative ease, as we would see none other than Sukuna's finger laying in the wreckage, which Yuji would obviously pick up and hold and say, so this is why it was so strong. Makes sense. With Nobara and Megumi genuinely being shocked at what they had just seen, Yuji had defeated a special grade curse in the span of, in canon, 1 minute and 30 seconds. And they genuinely couldn't believe the amount of power that Yuji had just shown. Megumi at that point would have realized that yes, his assumption about Yuji was correct. He was a monster by all means, and that him joining the Jujutsu High was definitely something that would help them very much, as he would be very happy that he had went on this path to try to get Yuji to join. As Nobara couldn't believe what she was seeing at all and was frankly losing her whole mind. She couldn't perceive Yuji's movements, barely, and not only that, he was just on another level entirely, a level that she wouldn't be able to catch up to, it seemed like, at all. He was just literally on some other level that they could not even imagine she would be thinking, as she would immediately compare him to Gojo Sensei, with Megumi actually telling Nobara in that instance that, he actually fought Gojo Sensei, right? With Nobara trying her hardest not to just fall out from the absurdity of it all. She genuinely could not believe this Yuji was this incredible. And Nobara actually liked Yuji in this timeline because, again, he was an intelligent person and he kind of just was very charismatic. He was kind of like the perfect guy, I guess, that a girl would probably want. Or he could be, or at least he can act that way. He definitely wasn't like annoying like he was in the main timeline to Nobara. So she would actually kind of like him. So to think that he was this powerful too, she would kind of just be flustered by it all. But of course, this is where we then see Yuji tell them that, well, now that that's finished, we should return this finger to Jujutsu High. As they would all nod, as they would leave the Jujutsu Center with the special grade curse being terminated with relative ease. As this would be the end to the Jujutsu Center arc, of course. After this happens, again, Sukuna is not in the story, so the finger doesn't get eaten. It's just held at Jujutsu High. And of course, after this would all happen, this one would then see Megumi tell Yuji that he's going to surpass him no matter what, as he would tell him that his 10 Shadows technique will definitely be able to allow him to do that if he works hard enough and trains hard enough. With Yuji nodding, knowing that's not going to happen, as if Gojo was the strongest sorcerer here and he could barely do anything to him, there was no way that Megumi was ever going to have any chance of reaching him at all. But he would encourage Megumi to do his best and do the best that he could do, with him also telling that to Nobara, even though she didn't really care for all of the whole, rival this, like, I'm going to be better than you this. But she would think it's cool that Megumi is actually putting up, the effort. The reason I also brought up Sukuna earlier is because that means there won't be that whole ordeal where basically everybody's like, oh, wow, Yuji came back to life, because he never died in the first place. So after this all takes place, this is where Gojo will be informed about basically what Yuji did for Megumi and Nobara, with him having a smile on his face and starting to burst out in laughter, as he just can't believe the absurdity of somebody like Yuji even being able to do literally anything like this. Like, imagine you just heard that somebody was capable of beating a special grade curse with like one punch, then low-key lasers bleeding, which he used my bad, I lost the ability to talk right there, with complete precision. But not only that, then only needed one more punch to beat it. He just could not believe what he was hearing. Obviously, Gojo had thought that Yuji was pretty much already a special grade sorcerer because he was able to contend with him, and Gojo literally could not do anything against him. So he literally already thought Yuji was like a special grade sorcerer. But the thing is he couldn't even really call him that because he wasn't a sorcerer by normal means. or not even that, he just wasn't a sorcerer. Dude literally didn't use curse energy, so how could he be a sorcerer? What Gojo actually thought is he was, if he, or when he does actually gain curse energy, there really won't be anyone to stop him, including Gojo, as when he gets a, simple domain, or if Yuji was able to actually get a regular domain, he would think, what would he do against him? Because once that happens, like after a domain clash, Gojo's infinity is gone. So he would just be sitting there thinking like, yeah, if that happens, yeah, Yuji's going to absolutely destroy me. So he would be thinking that if Yuji gets that strong, he literally will actually be the strongest, as it doesn't seem like anybody can actually beat him when it comes to throwing hands. Of course, after this all takes place, this is where Gojo gets up and goes to talk to Yuji himself, where we would see Gojo begin Yuji's training like he did in the main timeline, where basically Yuji would begin to watch the movies and eat popcorn. Of course, during this time, Gojo would think it would actually be good to send Yuji on some missions. I'm just going to be saying that the time slot for his training is longer, like maybe a month, instead of like it being like a week or two or a couple of days. I don't really remember what it was in the main timeline, but I'm going to say Yuji gets more time to train. And the main reason for why this is because the disaster curses would genuinely be wondering if attacking Gojo was a good idea, as they had actually somehow managed to get feed thanks to the likes of Geto being able to put some, special curses around, considering he has curse spirit manipulation. He would obviously be able to do this to get some imaging on basically the prospects of the Jujutsu High, as he thought that was a good thing to do. And they had seen what Yuji was capable of doing to a special grade curse with ease. So they would be thinking that maybe it's better to just hold back for now. But eventually Geto would realize that holding back actually isn't the best course of action, as it would actually be better if they were to go all in right now. So he would obviously tell Jogo that it would be better for him to go right now to probably see or test Gojo's limits to see just how crazy he really is. And that's exactly what Jogo would go do, saying he won't let him down. As this is where we would then see Jogo intercept Gojo in his car, as they would have a brief scuffle. But this is when Gojo would get an idea. Yuji was currently sitting there in his room, as you would expect, eating popcorn and watching movies, which he honestly had no problem with, as Yuji, again, was just kind of physically gifted in all the ways that would obviously matter, but it's just being naturally built thanks to solar radiation, so he didn't really ever have to train or work hard that often for his physique, if that makes sense. So once this was all done, this is when we would then see Gojo appear in the room, grab Yuji, and then teleport back to Jogo, where this is where we would then see Gojo tell Yuji to exterminate the likes of Jogo, with Yuji looking towards Gojo thinking, are you sure you want me to do it? Why didn't you do it? I've been doing a lot of missions lately, which Yuji had been, and he had been doing them effortlessly with ease, as again, with his super speed and flight, Yuji could actually go so fast now to the point, thanks to his curse energy that he had been building up from all these missions and stuff, which was able to amplify his stats even more, to be capable of actually making it to the point where people couldn't even see him when he chose to fly. Although Yuji would usually, go out and basically try to hide his speed, but he was still, like, at this point, like, the most efficient sorcerer outside of Gojo, as when he went to a mission, the cursed spirit, it was done. Like, there was no chance. And this was going to be no different, as Yuji would tell Gojo, fine, I'll do it, but you owe me a burger and fries, with Gojo starting to laugh, as he would say, yeah, sure, whatever. As Jogo, seeing Yuji, would be shocked and kind of scared of him, as he had obviously seen the recorded footage of the cursed spirit of Yuji obviously never effortlessly beating the special grade curse. But of course, Jogo would think, I'm on a different level. There's no way this kid actually could be that crazy, right? I must have just been seeing things in that recording. Geto was just, or he would think Kenjaku was just being a little too worried. Of course, this is where Jogo would start firing lava attacks at the likes of Yuji, thinking that this would be a simple task, as Yuji couldn't really be that powerful, right? But of course, Jogo would be horribly wrong, as he would get speed blitzed and then punched into another city. Not joking, he literally gets punched into another city, as Yuji did not have time to play with him. And since they were over like terrain or forest, Yuji would be able to fly at his ridiculously fast speeds to get to Jogo. As Gojo would be shocked by this, thinking there's no way he actually just did that. As this is when we see Yuji be there before Jogo even gets there, as he would punch Jogo back towards where Gojo was in the sky, as all people would hear is like a bang, and then another bang, as they'd be like, what the heck was that? What was that? As they look up and see nothing, as Yuji and Jogo were already gone. Of course, once Yuji gets back over the forest, which he obviously beat Jogo to, he would grab his face and he would slam Jogo into the ground, flying out of the air and slamming him into the ground as all the trees in the vicinity would get basically destroyed, as Jogo would be sitting there crying and being sad as he literally had just gotten defeated in basically 3 punches. As Jogo would be begging Yuji for his life, saying, "Please, please don't exterminate me. Please don't exercise me. Please, please, please." Begging Yuji. But Yuji would tell him, "Well, no offense, but yeah, I can't do that. You're dangerous, and obviously you're not going to just be nice to people, so yeah, that's not gonna happen." As Jogo would literally just be like, "No!" As Jogo would try to make his domain expansion, but yeah, no, Yuji was way faster than those hand signs were. In fact, Yuji seeing Jogo even go for his hand signs would decide that the best course of action would be to just use his lasers to basically, in his x-ray vision, to just cut off Jogo's arms. As Jogo would be sitting there with no arms, starting to cry, as he genuinely just knew it was over for him, as Yuji would obviously punch Jogo in the head once more, as it would become a loud smash, be this loud thud, as that'd be the end of Jogo, as he would have been exterminated, or better yet, exorcised with ease. As Yuji would now use his speed and flight to make it back to Gojo, when Gojo would clearly ask Yuji, "Wait, you could fly this whole time? Wow, what exactly even are you?" As Yuji would say, "I'll explain it to you all one day, but for right now, I'd rather keep it to myself," he would say with a smirk on his face. "And more importantly, you owe me a burger and fries, sensei." As they would both begin to laugh, as Gojo would say, yeah, you're right. How about let's go get it right now?" And this would be the end to Yuji, or better yet, what was supposed to be Gojo versus Jogo. But yeah, so Jogo, as you would expect, gets exterminated. Once this happens, the sewer would then see Yuji make it back to his house after getting his burger and fries, as he would obviously begin to continue to keep reading. I mean, not reading, but actually, no, reading. He would also be reading while watching the movies because, yeah, again, remember, he has super intelligence. So he can just kind of read through books and also watch the movies. And he would still be gaining curse energy from doing this. So once this happens, this is where we would then see Yuji have a change of scenes, as Gojo would tell him to go with Nanami, as they would go to investigate a movie theater where apparently some crazy things have been taking place. So once they go there, they basically see a bunch of mutated humans, which would shock the likes of Yuji, as again, he was just more empathetic in this timeline. Once he sees these humans, though, he would be disgusted and he would feel saddened looking at them, thinking that he was going to get the cursed spirit who was responsible for doing this to these people, as Nanami would nod his head and say, yeah, most definitely. But this is when Nanami would send Yuji to basically go to the school because they had heard that maybe he had went that way, or the cursed spirit that had caused this, or there may be some disturbances over there, he would say. So this is when Yuji would nod his head and make his way there. As of course, as you would expect, Yuji would run into Junpei, as since he had been watching a lot of movies, and because he's super intelligent, he would be able to have a really in-depth conversation with the likes of Junpei about movies, better than he did even in the main timeline, despite just watching the movies, and which would have been pretty good either way. Of course, Junpei, being a movie buff, would love to talk to Yuji, as eventually talking to Yuji long enough, they would become friends. And of course, Junpei would invite Yuji over to his house to eat some food, which Yuji, being a Kryptonian, obviously would accept because, well, you need some fuel to keep going on, right? And Yuji liked to eat, if nothing else. So he would go with Junpei, as he would meet his mom and greet her, as basically she would be happy to see that Junpei had made a friend, as they would sit down at the table, as Yuji would begin to eat the food that Junpei's mom had made. So just think about your favorite food, because that's basically what they're eating. For me, it would be like maybe a burger, because that's like low-key my favorite food, but yeah, I don't know what it'd be for you. Considering he just ate a burger and fries, like not that long ago, don't really think he would probably be eating that. But yeah, just think about your favorite food. That's what they're eating. As we would then see the likes of Yuji look to the left, as he would see it, something that he needed to take without question, as using his super speed, even when Junpei and his mom actually looking, he was able to speed blitz their perception, as he was just that fast, as they would definitely feel the air moving in the room. But as they looked towards Yuji, he looked like he had moved, and they would wonder, what the heck was that? Where did that wind current just come from? They couldn't understand. And Yuji would say, yeah, what the heck? You're playing along, like he wasn't the one who just did it. But of course, this is when he would finish the meal, as he would thank Junpei's mom and tell Junpei that he was really cool and that he's happy that he was able to talk to him about movies, as Junpei would agree. And this is where we would see Yuji walk out of the Junpei household, as this is where he'd be happy that he was able to get Sukuna's finger out of there, as he knows how much damage these things can cause thanks to how his situation went down with the Occult Research Club. He would be really confused, but he would have learned about Sukuna. Remember, the deal with Gojo. So he would have learned about Sukuna and why everybody wants these fingers and why they're so dangerous. So yeah, he would get it. Nonetheless, this is where we would then see Yuji not eat it like he normally would do because, well, he doesn't already have Sukuna inside him, so he's not the vessel. So he would just take the finger back to Jujutsu High and keep it in safekeeping and storage. After this takes place, this is where we would then see Yuji basically go to sleep, as we would do a complete and utter change of scenes, not from just the scenes, but also to another character, as this is where we'll see Junpei's point of view, as Junpei would have just walked in to see tons of mutated humans at the assembly at his school, and he would be frankly shocked, to say the least, as Mahito would come up from behind him and shocking him and telling him how cool it was. Don't you think it was amazing what I was able to pull off here? As Junpei genuinely couldn't believe what he was saying, or that Mahito turned out to actually be this type of person, or better yet, even be capable of performing such a ridiculous feat at all. He would have thought Mahito was his friend, but right here he had learned that no, he wasn't. He was a freak of nature, and that he should never even try to hang out with him or be friends with him in the first place, as Junpei would begin to start backing up. And as you would probably expect, Mahito would take a step forward, trying to get closer to Junpei to end him, as frankly he just didn't like Junpei anymore because he wasn't happy with the art that he had made, or how he had made things so much more interesting, even though he really hadn't. He was just killing people and turning them into his personal playthings. But that's the way Mahito viewed things, you know, all messed up. But frankly, before Mahito could even take another step, this is where we would see Yuji appear, as he would come out of literally nowhere, perception blitzing both Junpei and Mahito, who hadn't even realized they had appeared until they just saw the wind current in the room, and they'd be like, what the heck is all of this? As Junpei would look to his right, but he wouldn't even see Yuji, as Yuji was already gone. And when he looked back to his left, Mahito was also gone, and there'd be this giant hole in the wall, where we would then see in the sky, Yuji was just punching Mahito back and forth throughout the air over and over again, just beating him up, and Mahito can't really do anything at all. He's getting punched in the stomach, face, solar plexus, getting punched literally everywhere. His legs, his face, his back, his neck. He's just getting defeated. As Yuji obviously had read many books on martial arts, and frankly that's all he really had to do, because he already had the physical prowess to basically be able to use them with ease. So because of that, his super intelligence comes in clutch here, as he just starts to demolish Mahito until he smacks him into the playground from, you know, the sky into the ground, which will lead to this massive explosion outside. And of course, Yuji would then proceed to land on Mahito with a gigantic thud, as we would see another giant shockwave go over the place. Mahito getting absolutely pulverized by the likes of Yuji here. Now, Mahito actually in this timeline had an advantage. He could actually defeat Yuji with Idol Transfiguration because Yuji didn't have Sukuna as his vessel. So the thing about that is Yuji would already be kind of accessible to that, basically, is what I'm saying. So yeah, Yuji, unlike most what ifs, is kind of immune to Mahito's ability to do that because he has Sukuna soul. So that kind of prevents that from happening. But here, no, if Mahito actually got a hand on Yuji, he could use Idol Transfiguration on him. The problem is that Yuji wasn't like regular Yuji. For one, he was way stronger than regular canon Yuji at this point by a long shot, like in another way entirely. But not only that, Yuji just didn't play with these cursed spirits. And he literally said once he found the spirit that, if you remember, who did all these disasterly deeds to these people, he was going to make him pay. And so Yuji was not giving Mahito even the slightest chance to put his palm on him or touch him. He was getting flung around all throughout the playground, getting knocked around, beaten up, and Yuji's even enforcing his cursed spirit energy into it, just hitting him multiple times over. Obviously, through reading books, Yuji would have even discovered the Black Flash, which thanks to Yuji's Kryptonian biology, he was actually even able to time perfectly if he wanted to. So he would hit Mahito with like 3 Black Flashes, which would be no problem for Yuji. Is at this point, Yuji is just so powerful. He's making himself even more powerful by the power of 2.5, man. It just wasn't close at all. Nanami shows up and is just shocked to see what's happening to Mahito. Mahito wouldn't even have a chance to awaken in this timeline, as Mahito, despite being able to protect his soul, you know what I mean, like being able to move his soul around so that you can't damage him, Yuji was hitting him so fast and hard, it didn't really matter if Mahito moved his soul around, bro. He was getting hit in it no matter what. You know what I mean? And not only that, Yuji was punching him so fast that it didn't really matter if he even tried to regenerate, because not only was his soul actually getting hit because Yuji was hitting him too fast for him to even react or even perceive, but also he just didn't have time to regenerate even if he wanted to. So Mahito is basically on the brink of death here, and Yuji's landing more and more punches into this guy. This is when we would see Yuji punch Mahito in the face, hitting him with an uppercut, as he would get sent flying into the sky. As Yuji would then begin to use his laser vision to slice up all of Mahito's parts. Now Mahito is like this disjointed mess as he's sitting on the ground like you would see in season 2 or the Shibuya incident, basically when he was running away from Yuji, and he's just crying and scared, trying his best to get away, scaring away, as he didn't even awaken in this timeline due to getting completely demolished by Yuji. As he would think, how did I run into this monster? What am I going to do? As he would try to escape. But no, Yuji wasn't having any, and he basically would use one final punch to cause this massive explosion into the ground, creating this gigantic crater. As this would be the end to Mahito, as after that, he would get exorcised, and that would be the end to two of the disaster curses. After this takes place, Nanami would nod his head and say, wow, you really are a special great sorcerer, he would think, with Yuji nodding his head and saying, well, I guess so, but you're not really a sorcerer. My powers come from, well, I'll explain it to you guys one day. He would just say that he's happy that he was able to get revenge for basically all the trouble that this guy had caused. And he told him that he would make him pay, and Nanami would say, yeah, you really did. You really are something else. Itadori Yuji. As Yuji would have a small smirk on his face, as this is when Junpei would come outside, but he wouldn't see anything. As Yuji, using his super speed, would have grabbed Nanami and gotten out of there, not wanting to actually explain to Junpei in this timeline anything about Jujutsu sorcerers or any of that, as he genuinely just didn't want Junpei to join Jujutsu High, as he didn't really see a reason for him to join. And not only that, honestly, seeing the traumatic experience that he thought for himself, he could only imagine the way Junpei was feeling. Trying to get Junpei to join Jujutsu High just didn't feel right for Yuji, or especially this version, to me. So I don't feel like he would explain anything to him. I feel like he would have just saved Junpei. Also, that's another thing. He didn't actually know, too, that Junpei had actually interacted with Mahito. Yuji just kind of came in there. And yeah, I know he has super hearing, but he can filter certain things out. So he would have filtered out this conversation, obviously, they had had. And because of that, this would lead to him basically punching Mahito, not even knowing that he was even interacting with Junpei. He had just come through there, saw Mahito about to attack Junpei, and basically had punched the crap out of him. And basically that's how that went. He didn't even know he had interacted with Junpei. So yeah, he didn't even know Junpei knew that Mahito existed, or that basically he could even see cursed spirits. Because if he did, then maybe he would have thought maybe a little bit more about including Junpei into like Jujutsu High. But nah, he wouldn't do that in this timeline. He wouldn't even tell him or explain anything to him. So Junpei doesn't join Jujutsu High in this timeline, and Junpei just goes to a different school because his school does still get shut down. But nonetheless, Junpei would live a pretty good life if you care about Junpei. So after that happens, this is basically where we see him make it back to, Jujutsu High. He would go on to explain everything to everybody and basically how everything went. And after this takes place, this is where we see a time skip to the next arc, which would basically be when they fight the Kyoto team, or the Toto team, as I like to call it. As this is basically where we would see Yuji and his team at Jujutsu High basically start to use their strategy, basically talking over it. But basically their strategy would honestly be to just let Yuji go loose and basically just defeat all of them. Which Yuji would smirk and say, I don't think that would be fair to the other team, and I don't think that's in the spirit of the event, he would say. As they would all nod and say, yeah, I guess you're right. So Yuji would ultimately go find Toto, as he would completely wash him, as Toto would be defeated not too long after, as the rest of the Kyoto team would have thought about jumping Yuji, but seeing how easily Toto was defeated, which I'm not even joking, Yuji wouldn't have held it back on Toto at all. Why would he do that? Toto would want him to go all out, so that's what he would do, as Yuji would beat Toto in like 3 punches. As Toto would be knocked out, this is where we would then see Hanami, that was sent by the likes of Geto / Kenjaku, which, nobody knew he was actually Kenjaku at this point, but Geto, I guess, would send the likes of Hanami to hopefully beat Yuji. He would be thinking, yeah, no, Hanami's all plants. Yuji turns around, uses his solar vision, cuts Hanami into little pieces. Hanami is instantly exorcised. Yeah, that's the Hanami fight. Toto is already knocked out. He doesn't give the whole exposition about what's your type of woman. He doesn't tell Yuji he's his brother. He doesn't ask Yuji if he's ever hit up like Flash, because Toto's already knocked out. Hanami shows up. Hanami proclaims that she's gonna get revenge for Jogo. That happens. Yuji turns around, sees it's a cursed spirit. Obviously, Yuji really hates cursed spirits in this timeline because they cause nothing but pain and trouble. And Yuji is kind of more of a kinder guy in this one. He's even more nicer than he was in the original. So yeah, he really hates all the things that these things can do, and basically just knowing about them, he just doesn't like them. So he would just use his laser vision to cut up Hanami into bunches of tiny pieces and exercise her with like a kick to officially smash her into nothing. And after all that happens, this is where Hanami would be exercised, that we would see the end of this event, as Jujutsu High would obviously win with ease. As what the heck were they going to do against Yuji? Like, seriously. But after this happens, this is basically where we're then to see the likes of the death painting arc be skipped as usual. As again, Yuji, what can I say? What do you think is gonna happen? But this is when we do a change of scenes to Geto getting frustrated, as genuinely Geto just could not fathom the fact that Yuji had actually been this incredible, that he had been this much of a thorn, this much of a pain in his side. He just couldn't believe anything like it. Like, what was Itadori Yuji? What even was he? Because this dude seemed to have so many different abilities. And yes, Gojo had a couple of different abilities, but it made sense because he had the Six Eyes and Limitless and Infinity. And, those all made sense because they all linked together. And it's what led to all his different powers and properties and stuff. But Yuji was like a different animal entirely. He just couldn't put him into a category. He could do so many different things that he had been recording due to his cursed spirit manipulation. As Geto would be sitting there being confused and just not knowing how to proceed with his plans, he began talking to the likes of Choso, his two brothers, and of course the likes of Dagon. But this is when something that usually would never happen in my what ifs actually happens. Out of the sky, something just crashes in to their base, their place of planning. It would just smash right through it. And they would look up and be like, what? What the heck is that? As we would see none other than Itadori Yuji. As he would look up and say, found you guys. It took me a while after filtering all the noise and stuff out, but I knew I would eventually find the rest of you. I knew that there was someone pulling the strings, as Gojo and me had talked about it, and we knew there was somebody pulling the strings behind those other two curses, especially when one came to Jujutsu High specifically to attack. We knew that there had to be more, or some type of organization that was at hand here of cursed spirits. And of course, now that I found you, you're through. As Yuji had obviously went there immediately after he had discovered them without even telling Gojo where they were going. So Gojo actually didn't even know where Yuji was right now, but he was sure that Yuji probably would have it handled, but he knew that he'd be having to fight a lot of special great curses, but he would think, Yuji probably can handle it. And obviously he could. As all of them look at him and say, what? How could you have possibly found us? How could you have done that? And this is when Yuji would tell him that he has super hearing, and basically he goes off the noise most of the time. But that's when he remembered that basically if he uses super hearing, he might be able to hear them talk, as he should be able to do that. And he would say that, yeah, that's exactly what happened. So they would all be shocked that Yuji could even do that or even had that power, as this is when they would all begin to unanimously attack Yuji, as Geto will use his cursed spirit manipulation to summon out Rainbow Dragon. As this one would then see the other three attack, with Choso releasing a piercing blood as his other two brothers would lunge at Yuji, as obviously Dagon would start to fire off water, wondering if he should activate his domain expansion, but considering numbers were better, even though it wouldn't be that bad to activate his domain expansion here, we'll see what happens. Yeah, fast forward about 1 minute and this battle is already over. Yuji has used his super strength to punch the crap out of the Rainbow Dragon, sending it flying backwards. To the shock of all of the disaster curses, Yuji easily dodged Choso. He had easily taken out his two brothers and already exercised both of them. He had punched Choso in the stomach, punched him in the face, and slammed him onto the ground. And after that happened, this is where we then see him make his way to Dagon, as he would punch Dagon into outer space, as he would just die, getting thrown into the sun, and basically just burning up. Geto would be standing there looking at all of what just happened in literally the span of a minute and being confused. He would think, how? What are you? Why did you have to exist in this era? Why did you have to ruin my plans? But this is when Yuji would say, well, I'm ruining your plans because you're bad and you cause trouble and you're causing trouble for humankind. And frankly, I don't like that too much. As Yuji would speed blitz the likes of Geto, hitting him in the head with a headbutt as Geto would fall back, showing off the lid of his head, showing that Kenjaku was nothing more than a cursed spirit that had just inhabited this body. As Yuji, not knowing the history between Geto and Gojo, he wouldn't even know that. He would just think that this whole body was a cursed spirit. And frankly, thinking about that like that, even though he saw all this and saw the curse, the head talking, he just would think, yeah, not too sure about this. As he would ultimately just grab Geto, and basically what he would do is pretty simple. He would take him up into the sun and burn his body alive to exterminate the curse permanently. And sure, just in case, if this body had been somebody else's, and seeing that the way Geto was getting used and stuff, he would think it would just be better if nobody ever used his body again, if that's actually what's happening. Doing this faster than Kenjaku could even speak, as in that instance, Kenjaku, along with the other disaster curses, have been all defeated except for the likes of Choso. As simply the only reason he hadn't officially taken out Choso was simply due to the fact that honestly he thought his attacks were enough to defeat him. But this is where we think she chose to actually get up, being shocked that his two brothers were basically exercised along with that gone, and obviously Geto had been, defeated. As Choso would get up and, well, he would leave. And he would never cause trouble ever again because they like Choso. And I think he'd be smart enough to realize that there was nothing he could do to beat Yuji. So Choso's the only one that lives, but he only barely lives. But he would just go on to live a very peaceful life and never cause any trouble again, because if he did, he knew what he'd have to deal with. And with this being said, this wouldn't even be the Shibuya incident. This would just be the Yuji incident, because he just appeared after hearing them and took them all down before the Shibuya incident could even happen. And because the Shibuya incident doesn't happen, well, that's where we're going to be doing a change of scenes to the final scene of this What If. As we see Yuji make his way back to Jujutsu High, basically he would land on the top of the building. This is when he would tell Gojo that he had accomplished the task of defeating all the disaster curses. And as Gojo would hear this, he would congratulate Yuji and tell him that he knew that something was up and that someone was, pulling the strings. As Yuji would nod his head and tell him, yeah, you're right. You knew it. This is when Yuji would come down off the building, as he would then talk to Gojo about basically how he was able to also recover all of the fingers of Sukuna that the disaster curses had been holding on to. And them hearing this, they would be shocked to see that they had all of the fingers of Sukuna. And with that being said, this is basically where they would put all of them in safekeeping and hide them all away so that nobody could ever get their hands on Sukuna's powers. With this being said, this is when Gojo would say, well, I would say your job's complete. You defeated all the disaster curses, but your job will never really be done, he would say. And as Yuji would nod his head and say, yeah, I'm going to keep being a Jujutsu sorcerer because it really allows me to help people and it stops these curses from being able to do whatever they want, he would say. And obviously Gojo would nod and say, yeah, you got that right. He would say, yeah, if you keep going like this, you'll definitely become way stronger than me, he would say with a smirk. And as Yuji would say, yeah, I think I already am, teach. As Gojo would say, I don't know about that, but I do know one thing, I'm pretty hungry. How about you? As you say, yeah, let's go and get something to eat. This is where we see Yuji and Gojo go off to get something to eat, as all of Sukuna's fingers have been collected. And obviously Yuji's life was never in any mortal danger. And if anything, Yuji had finally found a place to call home that wasn't with his grandfather. As he would think about him one final time and think that he would continue to keep killing curses, how he would continue to keep helping others, and how he would continue to keep being a Jujutsu sorcerer, because if he continued to do that, he would continue to always help people, and he would continue to always keep his promise to his grandfather. And as we see this final scene turn to black, Nesoro would then see the end. So what if Yuji was a Kryptonian? Yes! Oh my god, bro. Yeah, that was kind of peak, bro. I kind of liked the way I did the ending there. I thought it was fire. I didn't feel the need to go into like a crazy in-depth ending there because I just didn't feel like it was too necessary. And I honestly think the ending was perfect. I hope you guys thought the rest of the What If was perfect. Yeah. So I did some different things in this one. And I think those are the things that would actually happen. And I think they were intricate and I think they made it different. I think it made it an overall pretty good story. And I know you guys really like my Yuji What If, so hopefully you like this one. And also I did this one because it was a request. But yeah, so I'm going to just tell you guys this right now. The next What If will probably be Tanjiro. And no, I have not forgotten about What If Deku was Sub-Zero. I'm going to get to What If Deku was Sub-Zero when I restart the rotation back up. But I just want to let that be known because the rotation starting back up is obviously taking a while. Because I'm not going to lie, I might do one more Tanjiro What If, one more. And then I might go back to the rotation after that. But I might do one more Yuji. I don't know. But if I do one more Yuji, I'm going to do one more Tanjiro. So yeah, Tanjiro already has like 3 What If movies, and now he has like 5. So I'm not too sure about that. So I'll see like how they stack up to the rest of them. Honestly, Deku Sub-Zero is actually going to get put back a lot because I actually made that random What If Deku had an OP Fire Quirk one. So yeah, but if you guys did ever join this video, I hope you did. I have kept you guys long enough. It's been an hour long, so I'm going to get up out here. Thank you guys for all watching. If you made it to the end of the video, leave the word almond chocolate bar because I love those. And I love anything with almonds and chocolate. They're my kryptonite. And if you have any word suggestions, please be sure to leave in the comments below. I'll be sure to get to them. Hope you guys all did enjoy. And I will catch you guys on the next What If. Deuces, I'm out, guys. Have a nice day. God bless. I'm going.